This is actually not an easy speech to give because I've given myself the task of explaining to people who are concerned about the Chinese policy changes. There have been quite a few analyst firms trying to pay me $500 an hour for me to talk about the subject, and I wouldn't. But this is different. We're just talking in the industry from one company to another. So I will do my best to give you my perception of what's happening, what will happen, and what should we do about it. And a good friend of mine reminded me not everyone is very knowledgeable about Chinese market. So I'm putting a few pages here to quickly talk about Chinese market. All right, so you have to know this is already a fact. This is a reality. We live in the reality of China being the biggest gaming market in the world. Back in year 2000, China, I should say, game industry got bigger than Hollywood. That was year 2000 or 2002. And, you know, especially because of mobile games, China's game industry grew bigger and bigger and bigger. So even without console games, China is still growing to be the biggest market in the world, especially mobile. So especially mobile. PC game is not bad, but it's not anywhere near the size of mobile games. So within, I would say, 16 years, this market has grown a lot. So we have to realize this fact. And then this will sort of show you what type of games Chinese like to play. This is not an easy question to answer, and it depends on what kind of people you talk to, which game company you speak to, mobile games or PC, and also this chart would change. So this is the latest information that I could gather. I'm sorry the color is not, it's not very good, but you can still read it. So you could say, oh, it looks like Chinese like strategy games and RPG and card battle games. It would appear that way, and that's not a bad assumption. However, is that saying Chinese don't like action games? I would say if you look at the mass market, the entire market, how many people are playing action games, I would say, yes, that's sort of the minority, but the minority is still bigger than population of certain countries. So you still have a lot of people willing to play action games. So PUBG, for example, it's huge in China. Like PUBG, even for me, I consider it quite hardcore. I mean, I go in, I get my brains blown off, you know, in the game, 5 minutes into the game. But there are people who never play games who are playing this game in China. So, you know, it's a very interesting market. And depends on who's promoting a certain game genre in China. So when Tencent is pushing something, it usually will create sort of a new habit, new playing habit. Yeah, so that's shooting. But in general, what I just said, strategy, RPG, card battle games, that's not a bad bet. All right, so the mobile device landscape is very, very different. You know, we don't just have app stores and Google Play. We have App Store, great, just Apple for iPhone, and then we have like 200 channels for Android. Now you're saying, you know, it's not possible that 200 channels are all important. Then yeah, probably 50 channels are important. It's still 50 companies that you need to talk to. So it's highly complicated and fragmented for any publisher or developer to try to solve this problem. How can I talk to 50 developers? They all have different SDKs and different requirements, different interpretation of government regulations. It's really messy. So in my company, we have a really big department, and we call them, the department is called Channel Department, and they handle all the channels. It's basically a lot of people talking to a lot of different companies. And there's really no easy way to deal with this. It's just complicated. So this, in my mind, is one of the top, probably one or two reasons why you need a Chinese partner when you go into China. And this one is really hard to solve. A lot of problems in life, you can just solve it with your will. Like, I'm determined to solve this problem and I can solve it. This is not that easy. This is complicated. Okay. So this is kind of like a summary. So highly fragmented Android market, what you saw. Second one is highly regulated market. So Chinese government really think of themselves as parent. They need to decide what their children can and cannot watch. So movies, TVs, video games are all considered media, and they need to be regulated. And that's just the reality. We're not going to comment it here, and even if we do, it won't make any changes. So it's a highly regulated market. Some content are just not allowed or not easy to go into China. So all casino games, don't think about it. Adult content, don't think about it. It's just never going to work. But other, like a first-person shooter game, for example, it's very bloody. Yeah, you can maybe change the blood from red to green. Maybe that can work. Maybe change from ghosts to zombies. Maybe that can work. But again, casino games and adult games, just, you cannot do it. A lot of barriers, but the reward is big. The reward is definitely big. When I started making games 32 years ago, my dream was that, wow, I can make one copy and sell 10,000 times. Well, it's 1 billion times in China. So for me, as a game developer, the magic is that we can make something out of nothing, and then this something can get copied many, many times at very small cost. And that works really well in China. It's one big country speaking one language. So yes, barriers is very high, but the reward is very big. The data centers the data centers in China cannot sign an agreement, like a hosting agreement or deployment agreement with any foreign company, because to regulate the media, they're regulating data centers first. Just like, I mentioned the Android marketplaces, that's regulated too. So one of the reasons games without government approval cannot go live in China is because the Android marketplaces, they don't want to lose their license. So every game that they distribute, they have to see the government approval. It's the same thing with data center. So every data center to operate in China, they need a license. I just learned this, by the way, like this week from Amazon China. So I know people running Amazon China, pushing the gaming service in China, and their servers is behind the firewalls of China. And I asked him, hey, so I have partners in the U.S., they're running on AWS, they want to come into China, they want to reduce the latency, so can they just give it to you? And my friend asked me, are you sponsoring them? I'm like, what do you mean? He said, yes, we cannot sign a deal with them. We can only sign a deal with you. So you have to be a Chinese company to sign a deal with data centers. So this is another barrier. Now, you don't have to, right? You could always put your game's content or your server in Hong Kong or Singapore or anywhere in the world. As long as your game doesn't require low latency, then it's okay. But if you want better service, then it's important that you have your servers within the firewall, not outside the firewall. Otherwise, you're just going to see an increase of latency. The user acquisition and customer support, you require Chinese language skills. So user acquisition, for those of you who are experienced, if you deal with an international company, you can stick to your language. Yes, that's fine. But the local traffic providers, like Tencent, and there are quite a few other companies, especially we call it direct media buys. All the medias are Chinese medias, and they don't necessarily have English. They're business development people, salespeople speaking English. So sometimes to do user acquisition, to buy traffic in China, although you're a Russian company, for certain medias, if you want to buy their traffic, you need to be able to speak their language, unfortunately. And customer support, obviously, your customers are Chinese, and you need to have people who are able to communicate with them to solve their problems. So if you want to do customer support in China, and you want to buy high-quality traffic, you need local language skills. The reason I'm saying this is I'm not assuming every company will decide they need a partner in China. Some company may say, no, we'll want to do it ourselves. We'll want to do user UA, we want to do customer support. That's great. That's not regulated. You need to set up an office where you just need to have people who can speak the language. Okay, so the UA cost, actually, to my understanding, is the most expensive traffic in the world right now. Unfortunately, I hate it. I told my friends that when I was young, there were game developers and there were players. Players like the game, they pay the money, game developers get the money. Great. And later on, we got the publishers in the middle. So everybody hated the publishers because they get stuck in the middle and they take a big cut, right? Everybody hates them. Now there's channels between the publishers and the players, like App Stores, Google Play, and 200 channels in China. And then now we have app companies selling ads who don't make games, who don't buy games, but they're flush with cash. I mean, they sponsor a lot of conferences, game conferences. I went to more than 10 conferences this year, and many of them are sponsored by ad companies. That's great. And then you have companies who tell me, oh, we can help you detect frauds with those ads. Oh, okay. And then I have companies telling me, we can provide you insight, intelligence on the traffic that you're buying. Okay? So it's fine. This is the reality we're in. The game industry is becoming very complicated, but game developers are suffering because they're getting less and less money, so there are less and less game developers surviving or thriving. So the UA getting more expensive doesn't help. So this cycle has happened before in China, just so you know. At around 2010, it was the end of the PC online game era. All the ads got very expensive. And you have game companies to blame because they keep buying. So, the auction rules, the way it works, more people buying, they jack up the price. And then in the end, nobody can afford them, everybody dies, including the ad companies. So a lot of companies are switching over to direct media buys. More and more are doing that. Now, what's happening right now is Chinese companies are freaking out that certain medias are getting into channels and publishing business. So that's another fear, that the landscape is going to change again. So, the companies that has traffic, that owns traffic and generate traffic, they don't need the middleman. They don't need the publishers. They don't need the channels. They don't need to buy and sell traffic. They just host games and they have their own traffic. This could come. Casual and hyper-casual are having a hard time competing for traffic. Since the LTV does not justify the UA cost, Western games operating at a loss. So here's my another thesis, or another of my observations. There are a lot of games, and so far, the games we talk about are hardcore and midcore, so that you can afford buying traffic. Now, if your LTV is lower, you have high DAU, you have a lower ARPU, it's fine if you don't do UA, right? But if you do UA, how does that work? And actually, if you try to plug in the numbers, it doesn't work. So something strange is going on. People tell me, oh, Voodoo can buy traffic at few cents per user. And I said, that's great. Where can I buy that? They said, no, you can't. because they're them. It's called arbitrage. Only they can buy traffic at a few cents per user. Well, then that's not a rule. I'm not even certain if it happens to them. I don't think it happens to anybody. I think it's just a myth that you can buy traffic and sell traffic and be profitable in the middle. Because a lot of hyper-casual games, they don't have in-app purchase, right? They monetize through ads. But they have to buy ads to get users, and then they monetize through ads. So what's going on? Other than Apple giving them features, Google Play giving them features, where's that profit coming from? I mean, arbitrage can also mean they're losing money slowly. Especially in China, this really doesn't work. So just watch out for especially hyper-casual games claiming they're making a lot of money in China. It may look that way on App Annie. It may look that way on paper, but I'm not sure those are real numbers. Okay, so the current government policy update. The cards and casino-type games are first to be cleaned up. So they're gone. They're gone. Even domestic-made casino games. So if you have any gambling tendency, like mahjong is not even gambling, but it can be used for gambling, then it's dead. Poker cards, if you use poker cards for anything, or even like you're spinning the wheel, a lot of games have the wheel spinning, that's out. Even treasure boxes, that's being closely watched. So any casino-type games are being cleaned up right now. Violence and sexually explicit games are also being removed, so that's the second tier. Now, there are also people talking about, there's a lot of old ISBN, old government-approved licenses. We can use those licenses and swap out games. So government also made an announcement that that's not allowed. In fact, they're going out of their ways to make sure, compare the game that you're operating is the same as the game that you submitted. And if you get found out, that's called breaking the law. So it's not a small matter in China. So using OISBN on a new, this is not good. So don't even think about it. Now, if you already have a approved ISBN, you're doing updates, I think that's fine. The current situation appears to remain this way. People ask me, when are we going to wake up from this nightmare? And I ask a lot of people. I went to Beijing. I asked a lot of people. No one is giving me any good answers. No answer is good. So I would say I hate to bring people bad news. I hate to be that guy, but it doesn't look like we should be too optimistic. So we need to work around this issue. So what are the remedies? Apps do not require ISBN for now. So, but don't take this and think, hey, we'll submit games as apps. It doesn't work that way. It has to be apps. It has to be apps. And there's certain apps that can work. So I think this is one potential solution for Chinese companies and to start licensing apps into China. And it could go live right away without waiting for government approvals. Second one is instant games on QQ and WeChat do not require ISBN for now. And I should add some details for that. If you do in-app purchase, you do require ISBN. So the kind of games, instant games that do not require ISBN are ad monetization through ads type games. And I'm not saying this is like a certainty. This is a gray area right now. Right now it's okay. And other cell phone manufacturers' app stores like Vivo, Oppo, Huawei, they are all starting to do instant games now. Chinese games will export in a big way now. So these are my three solutions, or three remedies for the current problem, because the problem is not going away. So what you will see is a lot of Chinese companies will look for ways to export. So what's the opportunity here? Is to help them, work with them. For example, if you think Russia is a big market, then help Chinese company to bring their games to Russia. And don't just sell them traffic, because they'll just feel like you're just selling them something. But, really help them to succeed in foreign markets, because the need is great. What genre work well in China? So, again, these are ranking. RPGs. See, the reason they crack down on casino games is actually it's popular. But it's too popular. People use it for gambling and created a lot of social problems. And you can see on iOS and Android, the numbers are different. This DAU divided by MAU, the stickiness are quite different. So in general, it's not my personal opinion, it's the industry's stereotypical conclusion, is that iOS users are of higher quality in terms of payment. So they're willing to pay more. And the Android, because the device spectrum is so wide, they're still supporting 1 gigabyte internal memory Android devices in China. So some people, they just either cannot afford to get a new phone or just cannot afford to spend the money on games, or they just don't want to. And also the retention numbers on Android versus iOS is usually 5 to 10% lower. So, just the quality of user on Android is less in China than iOS. Okay. Opportunities and challenges. It's a highly competitive market. Half-hearted approach is not going to work. Patience is required. The first one is very important. If you don't get the first one, don't try. It's okay. I mean, there's still a lot of big markets. Like English-speaking markets is huge. Maybe we ought to be successful there first. So, yeah, China is highly competitive, very competitive. I mean, when you have an innovative game or an innovative idea, the way to work in China is, the first thing is you have to think to yourself, people will copy me. What am I going to do about it? So you have to think very differently in China. So not only when you have a great idea that works, you have to think of defensive mechanisms. Like, after I launch this, how would I stop other people from copying me? So these are the problems you don't necessarily have in the West. But you got to think about these things in China. All right. Constant visit may be necessary at some point. I do believe that face-to-face is necessary, especially after you have established a partnership. Well, maybe this is required for you to make sure which partner that you want to go with. Visit their office, meet with them face-to-face, understand their values. The UA, user acquisition, PR, branding, community management are all communication intensive. And I put them here is because you may require multiple communication windows for different subjects. A lot of companies just have one English speaker for all issues. And the problem with that is many of them are not technical. So when it comes to technical matters, they don't know how to translate. So I run international business development department in my company, and I'm fortunate that my major was computer science. So a lot of the technical related issues, my guys all come to me, and I happen to know technical terms in both languages, so I can help them in those matters. But I realize that this is rare. And the same thing can apply to other, like UA. There are a lot of terms that people use in user acquisition I don't even understand. Not to mention translating them. So channel relationship is more difficult. It's even difficult for Chinese publishers. So, just one example, I have actually other Chinese companies, business development people, coming to me, asking me to introduce Huawei to them, for example. Like, Chinese channels are being difficult for companies to talk to, even for Chinese companies, because of the scale, because they're too busy. So I'm just saying the communication is even difficult for Chinese companies. The future outlook. More international partnership will happen. Chinese will have to start going overseas, going out. Co-development, investment, co-publishing, different business models will appear. So this is going to happen. Guys, if you watch a lot of movies, you'll notice, like, Perfect World funded. What is that movie? Emergent? No. Divergent. You know that movie, Divergent? Perfect World funded it. And Tencent is funding the next Avatar. And Youzu is funding, a lot of different movies. And Alibaba is, funding a lot of them. So that appears to be working, Chinese may not know how to make Hollywood movies, but their money is good. So Hollywood certainly likes Chinese money. So some kind of flavor, some kind of international cooperation will happen, will work. Because these Chinese companies, they have to survive. Many of them are publicly listed in China, in Hong Kong, on NASDAQ, so they have to survive. The government approval process makes it very hard for indie games to survive in China. So what will happen next year is they will say, okay, we're going to approve some games. We're going to approve some quality games. So the quota will be controlled. It is this way for a lot of countries. So Hollywood movies or foreign movies coming to China, there's a quota control. So companies have to compete for those quota. I think the same thing will happen for games. That's why I say it's going to be difficult for indie games. Because indie games will have to compete for the same slots that those games have really, really big ARPU. All right. And then, like I said, more apps, more instant games, and more Chinese companies investing in foreign companies. I think we'll see more of this. And I think that will happen to developers, Chinese company buying developers because they don't have the bandwidth to make more games, make quality games fast. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Monty. Thank you.